So before we get into tasting some whiskey and talking about all the wonderful things that affect flavour and taste appreciation, can you maybe give a bit of a intro? How did you get into this world of whiskey and sensory science?
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Well, when I was at college, I got a part-time job at the wine department of Asda, of all places, and I really got into it. My boss at the time gave me this tiny book on wine, and I was trying to memorize the varietals and understand the difference between Cabernet Sauvignon and Sauvignon Blanc. You're like, which one's red, which one's white? And I saw at the college I was at, they're actually doing the WSETs as an evening course. And this is when the WSETs were just was it just beginner, intermediate, and advanced? I think none of this different levels and all this kind of stuff. And so I went back to work and I said, "Oh, they're doing these evening courses. Would you pay for me to do it?" And they said, "Yeah." They didn't have anything in house at that time, and so I did my WSETs as an evening course in college, and really got into wine. I loved it. And then obviously when I left college, I sort of was like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't really pursue a career in wine at Asda. It's not going to go very far. But Oddbins had a job going. So I got a job with Oddbins, and that kind of opened up my whole world. But my boss at the time, he was quite into whiskey. And, in shops, you always have sample bottles open. After work, he'd often give me a dram to try. And it was horrendous. It was like walking on Lego bricks in bare feet. It was just too much going on for me. But he persisted, and he gave me a dram one day, and I thought, actually, I could drink that. It wasn't like, oh, that's amazing, but I could drink it, and that was the start. And then it's like a hook in you, just the diversity of flavors. Rum was my thing as well. I really love rum, and I kind of gradually got into whiskey, really. But then I ended up moving down to Brighton to do manage an Oddbins down there, and started a whiskey club called Malt and Copper when I was in Brighton, and that went for 6-7 years, something like that.
When was this?
This was early 2000s. I think 2003, something like that. I started, and this was the time when Ardbeg had just sort of rejuvenated itself. So we had the very young, still young, almost there coming out that we couldn't sell for love nor money. They were sitting on the shelves for £40 a bottle or whatever it was at the time. Nobody wanted it, and so in that environment, it was quite an exciting time for whiskey because consumer knowledge wasn't very high.
Yeah,
but the desire was. And so, through doing that, I just really got into whiskey. Did my diploma with the WSET, but kind of realized actually learning to pinpoint where a particular chateau is in Bordeaux on a map isn't really my thing. I was more excited about the chemistry and the sensory behind it. And then ended up moving to Edinburgh to kind of follow whiskey, really, I suppose. And got a job with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society on the bar, doing events for them as well. And Annabelle Meikle was my boss at the time, who was amazing. And she gave me freedom to experiment with the tastings there. And I kind of got really into the sensory side of that and experimenting in ways of, okay, how do we make this really complex drink a lot more easy for people to grasp? And playing around with colors and shapes and textures and all those types of stuff. Got involved with the panels, and then ended up leading panels, really. And that was my entry into the more sensory side of stuff. And then, since then, focused more on doing leading panels, sensory analysis, and more recently, I suppose, getting into just educating people about flavour. That's my sort of slightly long-winded journey, I guess.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So sort of from Asda all the way through
Yes.
Oddbins, and then understanding whiskey, and then really landing on actually the psychology of flavour perception.
Yeah.
So you'd say that that's more closer to your heart than, say, technical details about production?
Yeah, very much so. So when I was at college, I was studying psychology, and that's what really grasped me. the whole concept of the human mind and how we perceive things, how we function, how the non-conscious creates the decisions for us, that's always fascinated me. And when I realized actually you can use that to explain flavor, that's when it all my worlds kind of came together in one spot.
Okay.
And I realized in most drinks industries, whether it's whiskey, wine, gin, rum, whatever it is, we've become fantastic, like absolutely amazing at the chemistry. You can talk to people about the chemistry of whiskey or whatever, or cocktails even, and people will be able to tell you every single detail about the stills, about fermentation, different types of yeast, different types of grains, different types of malting, all the different cask types, what they mean, how they change the flavor, and all of this. We know so much about the chemistry. What nobody seemed to be talking about was how the chemistry becomes perception, which seemed kind of fundamental to me. The problem is, by not addressing that, we have all these questions and issues in the drinks industry where people feel that at a tasting, if they say the wrong thing, then people are going to start laughing and pointing at them. But actually, once you start to understand how the chemistry becomes perception, it removes a lot of the barriers that stand in the way of particularly inexperienced people coming into a new drinks category and being able to express that without feeling the pressure that there's a right and a wrong way of anything.
I guess when it comes to sort of technical production data, there's a huge amount of tangible information there. There's numbers, there's provenance, there's location, there's time. When it comes to sensory perception, there's sweeping statements we can make about things. This smells smoky, and then we can match that with the production parameter that made that whiskey smoky. But once you start getting into more nuanced details, first of all, the language of flavor perception is kind of fuzzy and hard to grasp. And secondly, it becomes increasingly difficult to relate that back to production data in an honest way, because there are so many different ways that flavor can manifest itself and be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a changing thing. You know, when we have tasting notes, we create tasting notes, it sort of creates a snapshot, just a single frame out of a video that says this is the profile of that product. But actually, the flavor, the perception of that product is a movie that changes. It has a start and it has a finish. And each time you watch it, you notice something different about that movie. No two times are ever the same, because we're each a different person on each given day. So each time we watch something, we approach it from a different mindset. And so it is this evolving thing, yet we try and compress it just into this single tasting note. And so no wonder people feel a bit overwhelmed by the whole process. And the language that's used it has to be quite vague at times, because the semantics, the language the vocabulary that we have in the English language, most languages for that matter, is simply not adequate for expressing something that's very abstract. And coming back to the chemistry versus sensory side of it, the chemistry is very tangible. When you talk to people in the whiskey industry, they love talking about the chemistry because it is tangible. You can look at a fermentation tank. You can look at yeast and grain and peat. You can look at the stills and see the wash bubbling away in there. And you look at casks and you look at the color of the product. But when we talk about aromas, we don't know they're there unless we smell them. They're completely invisible. We can't touch them. We can't feel them. They have no visual cues whatsoever. They only become part of our consciousness when we smell them. And this complex process transforms those molecules into this perception as an end result. So it's much harder for people to get their head around this abstract concept that is flavor, that is aroma, than it is the actual product itself, which you can look and touch.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you can put these liquids into a lab and put them through GC mass spec and get a kind of printout on our interpretation on what the volatiles are and what the aroma might be like. But that only really shows the occurrence of these molecules. It doesn't give you a sense of what they actually smell like when in concert with one another. And we've just, before we started here, we were talking about how just different intensities, higher concentrations of some of these molecules changes the aroma from one thing to another.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely complex sort of web of molecules that create that final aroma that a printout of a GC mass spec can't really describe. And then throw into that, we're all different. We all experience these things in a different way. We're not just one individual in one space in time. We are impacted by various things that go on around us, what we have for breakfast, whether we're too hot or too cold, the weight of the glass, the color of the liquid, myriad other things. So what I want to do today with you, and this is a fun little experiment, I think, is we're going to taste some whiskey. We're going to assess the aromas and the flavor of the whiskey, but we're going to do it in the most geeky, scientific way possible. Because what we're going to do is we'll start with ourselves. We're going to start thinking about who we are, how we're different from one another, our genetics, our state of mind. And then we're going to take a journey all the way through to the place we're sat in, what we're surrounded by, what we can hear, what we can smell, what we can touch. And then onto the bottles themselves, what they communicate and how that might indicate flavor. And then to the more sort of traditional parameters of tasting, looking at color, smell, taste, finish, texture, heat, all of it. And see if we can unpick the sort of hidden psychology that's going on in all of this.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing, my perspective on it, is it's not just the psychology, because cognitive psychology and behavioral psychology are one part of it. The wonderful thing with flavor for me is the fact that it's part psychology, it's part neurology, it's part biology, it's a large part philosophy as well, it's chemistry, and flavor operates at the intersection of all of these things. And I think this is perhaps what's created a slight knowledge gap in the industry, because if you're a scientist, you're a scientist in a field and you get paid to study certain things. If you're a psychologist, you'll study things that are relevant to psychology. Same with neurology, chemistry, whatever it is.
You're kind of siloed in that field.
You're siloed in that field, and that's what you get paid to do. So to have a perspective where you have a bird's eye view of all of the research and you can find the correspondences between different things and see where they all meet in the middle where flavor is, then you can start having a slightly more panoramic perspective on flavor and how it works beyond simply the psychology, but actually the neurology, and the philosophy comes into it so often.
Well, let's start with that. I was going to start with biology and genetics, and we can get to that shortly, but you've just piqued my interest with philosophy there. So how does the philosophy affect flavor?
Well, it comes down to the nature of reality. You know, like in the Matrix, what is real? How do we define real? If real is what we touch and what we see and what we taste and smell, then real is just electrical signals interpreted by the brain. So when we experience flavor, what is it we're experiencing? Because the unique thing with flavor, it's a cross-modal interaction. So it's all of our senses coming together. The traditional perspective is that it's taste and mouthfeel sensations, somatosensation, chemesthesis, and smell that creates perception. But I think we're now at a point where we're understanding there's much more to it than that is sight and hearing and touch and emotions and memories and satiation and everything. It all comes together. So, in fact, Charles Spence talks about this a lot, how flavor is the only form of perception that involves all of our senses. If you think about what we see, it's quite limited. It's based on all the visual information, but flavor's based on all information our body receives, all coming together. So therefore, flavor doesn't exist anywhere other than in our heads.
Conscious experience is what you're pointing at here. The
Yes.
combination of inputs that form a conscious experience that is flavour.
Yeah, I guess so. Although I think that flavour is a non-conscious experience that is projected to the conscious mind. We can call that flavour, but I would say that's just more of a projection of flavour.
Yeah, I mean, is that not true of any sensory input? That it's, the sound of birds singing obviously enters my ear, is processed by my brain, and then input into my conscious experience. You could say it happens subconsciously first because consciousness has to emerge from the neurobiology, the neurochemistry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but I guess with something like sound, it's much more of a raw feed.
Yeah,
we're interpreting waves, and whether we choose to pay notice to that sound or what meaning we apply to that sound is the non-conscious part, sending the signal to the conscious brain. But with flavour, it's not a raw feed at all. It doesn't actually exist until all this stuff happens inside our mouths.
There's more complex computation going on there before it arises.
It's a construct.
Yeah.
I would say to people, if a bottle of whiskey falls over in the middle of the forest and there's no one around to smell it, does it have any flavour? Without a person to create the perception of it, flavour simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
By definition, it doesn't exist.
So it's an emergent property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an emergent property because it's perception.
Yeah.
And perception is an emergent property. It's not something that exists outside of us.
Okay, so first step is to acknowledge your conscious philosophy and the emergent properties of computation that form flavour.
Yeah, I
good.
guess so.
That's a good starting point.
It's a good starting point. We're starting off easy. But it's a massive paradoxical shift because to understand that actually the drink in the glass doesn't have flavour is a huge shift to us because our visual information is so powerful. We're so visually dominant that we learn to associate the thing that goes on inside our mouths with the object in front of us. It's like when we smell something. If you smell a banana, we look at a banana and we can smell it. And what we think is we're smelling the banana, but we're not. Some volatiles are escaping from the banana. Some of those volatiles will reach our nose and we'll smell those. But it's not all of the volatiles in the banana. It's only a select few. But we associate those specific volatiles with the banana, and our brain just joins the two and says, well, that is exactly what that is. But it's slightly different. There's a stage that it takes to get there, and it's not the full experience of the banana. It's a slightly different experience of the banana. It's a filtered version because we're not getting all of the volatile molecules. We're only getting a select few that can make it to our nose.
Yeah. So, I mean, aroma, taste, smell... aroma, taste, and flavour are a form of interface with the world around us that we have evolved so that we don't eat poisonous things. We are attracted to tasty things or ripe things. We don't eat rotten things, etc., etc. It's an evolutionary pressure that has created an interface that we can interact with the world around us. Yeah,
essentially. It's like ChatGPT. It's like the first large language model in that any chemical stimuli are, or not even chemical stimuli, any stimuli are prompts. Okay, so when you have a whiskey, everything is a prompt. So that obviously we have the chemicals of the product itself. We have the shape and design and weight of the glass. We have the environment that we're in. We have all the other inputs, the feeling of the seat beneath you, the temperature, the sounds. These are all prompts that enter our system. And then the brain takes those prompts and creates an answer, which is flavour. And the flavour is the output. Everything else is just a prompt. So the better quality the prompts, the better quality the answer.
Yeah. And when you've had millions of years of evolution, it turns out there's lots of prompts that can be interpreted and lots of images of flavour that can be outputted.
Yeah, exactly. And it's dependent on each person based on their familiarity and upbringing and culture, genetics, everything.
So let's talk about genetics.
Yeah.
since that seems like the sort of next obvious point, biology, how different are people from one another in terms of the way in which we experience flavour?
Massively. So if you want to put a number on it, the way that we smell, well, let's say our olfactory receptor genes, the things that determine the types of smell receptors we have, on average, we have about a 30% difference in those between each of us. On average.
On average.
On average. So some are more, some are less. Researchers identified that actually for some that they looked at, there's a 60% difference. So averaging out, it works out about 30%. Do you like coriander?
I'm all right with coriander, yeah.
So lots of people don't.
Yeah, and it's genetic, isn't it?
It's genetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is the curious thing, because for some people it tastes like soap and it's bitter and it's disgusting. For other people it's lovely. And such is the hate against coriander. There's websites dedicated to it. It's amazing. But the question is, what is the flavour of coriander? Is it soap or is it green and herbal? And it really depends on the person.
And the answer is both.
Both. And this is why flavour is created inside of us. It's not something that's out there in the world. Because how can something be both disgusting and soapy? And how can something be green and fresh at the same time? It's purely down to...
The soap people are just lying.
Yes. That's what they say about everybody else. Yeah, but so the genetics is huge, and that's just your receptor neurons. We then have the whole olfactory bulb, your neural processing. We have all of the receptors for your taste, for mouthfeel sensations. You heard about the Supertaster thing. You use this prop sticks to see if people are very susceptible to bitterness. I mean, it's ridiculous, really, that we can brand somebody a Supertaster because they're very susceptible to bitterness. Just one actual marker of bitterness at that. It's just bonkers. But
yeah, I mean, if anything, I'd say it's a hindrance. Because heightened sense of what I say, one marker of bitterness is not going to be hugely beneficial in the modern world where we're not routinely eating poisonous substances.
Exactly.
And you're getting labelled as a supertaster, and yet it says nothing about your ability to detect aromas or indeed your sensitivity to sweetness and saltiness and sourness.
Yeah, this is it. But yeah, the genes determine everything. And the remarkable thing with genes, which a great many people don't really process, is the fact that they're getting switched on and off all of the time, and down to all kinds of decisions that we make. Down to sleep cycles, down to the food we eat, down to stress is a huge one. It switches on and off genes. And sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes that can be a bad thing. So a lot of health problems are caused because people have switched on genes that are now causing a problem for them, or they've switched off genes that were beneficial for them. So it's not just a flat thing that you have the genes you have and that is it. Not all the genes are switched on that you have. And that changes throughout your life, that changes throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. So it's your genetics is changing all the time. You have the same genes, but which ones are actually active and which ones aren't is variable.
So speaking about sort of stress, let's say, for example, and how something like that might affect your perception of flavour. Is it always true that in a stress state you've got genes flicking on and off, or can it sometimes just be a psychological state that isn't affecting your genetics?
Yeah, it can be all sorts. Yeah, it can be everything you do. Yeah, so it could be anxiety and stress. It could be the opposite of that. It could be relaxation, and because we switch between stress state, fight or flight, and a relaxation state constantly all the time. But it's when stress becomes more ongoing, when it starts to be a real issue. But it's a huge thing today, isn't it? For a lot of people that are working in high pressure jobs, and they need the job to fund the lifestyle, and they need the job to keep the house, but there's always this sword hanging over them of redundancy. So it's there's so much stress in the world.
Do we know anything about how state of mind actually affects flavour perception?
Yeah, There's some good Well, it changes everything, but there's some good research out there. Broadly speaking, this is the problem. It can be quite variable, the research,
Yeah.
but broadly speaking, stress seems to upregulate bitterness perception and downregulate sweetness perception.
Sounds quite poetic, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm feeling a
Yeah.
bit more bitter and less sweet.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an easy one to remember.
So bitter things taste more bitter and sweet things taste less sweet. So hence,
And then you've got a vicious cycle at work there, haven't you?
exactly.
Yeah, because you're
Exactly.
losing the sweetness of life and
Yeah.
raising the bitterness, and that's going to make you more miserable or stressed. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, exactly. So then you start reaching for sweeter and sweeter things to
Yeah.
try and address your deficit.
And then we know what happens then.
Exactly.
Wow.
Slippery slope.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And then you have the whole dopamine response as well, because people think dopamine's like the happiness, but dopamine is all about your want of things, like wanting. It's all about your pursuit of reward. It's what motivates you. Ridiculous experiment where they bred some mice without dopamine receptors, and they died because they couldn't be bothered to do anything. They
Right.
had no motivation. But the way dopamine works, it's a bit like a seesaw. So when you do something that is reward-based, motivational, your brain or your body dumps a whole load of dopamine on one side of the seesaw. So it tips it on the dopamine side. But the body likes homeostasis. We're always trying to achieve homeostasis. So to balance it, it dumps a whole load of stress on the other side. But then it puts too much on to overcompensate. So it goes the other way. So then you release more dopamine to try and bring it back into balance. But the problem is, the more you do that behavior, it shifts the fulcrum of the seesaw. So the dopamine side becomes longer
Right.
and the other side becomes shorter. So then you need more to keep the same balance. And the whole system gets completely out of whack. And that's what's addiction.
Yes. Yeah. That's addiction described in Playground.
Yes.
Yeah.
The use of seesaw.
The use of seesaw. Okay, so I mean that's first of all just fascinating about the genetic variability, and then I guess environmental stress, what you're kind of bringing to the table before you even pick up the bottle or the glass. There's a huge amount of programming that's already taken place there that's going to make the dram we pour different to me than it is to you. What about experience? Both you and I have tasted lots of whiskies, but let's imagine there's someone here who is very new to it. But obviously they've been eating food and drinking other drinks their entire life. How do you kind of factor in the, I guess, sort of flavor library that someone like you might bring to the table against someone who's less experienced?
Well, it's about identification. So when we look at expertise and what that means in the real world, it's predominantly expertise in vocabulary and identification. So novice people and experts, when they're tasting drinks, for example, are equally good at sensitivity. They have the same levels of being able to differentiate and understand the product. Where the difference occurs is actually being able to apply labels to the individual components within there. So actually give them names and identify them. That's the difference. And it's really a neurological difference, because you'll be aware that we have sort of right hemisphere and left hemisphere thinkers. Right hemisphere is creative and holistic, whereas left hemisphere is the analytical, language-based part. And with expertise, with practice, people become less right hemisphere dominant when they're smelling things and shift over to use more left hemisphere, and predominantly in the language centers. So when we talk about expertise and expert taster, we're talking essentially about language and the ability to apply language to the abstract perception of flavour.
Is it right that the right hemisphere is a little bit more sort of emotional side and the left is more linguistic? Yeah.
Exactly.
There's that book, The Master and His Emissary. Have you read that
No,
one?
no, it sounds great.
Yeah. So one's master, one's the emissary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like learning to juggle. You know, if you just learn to juggle, it takes practice. You can't just give somebody a set of juggling balls and say, off you go. It takes a while because you reprogram your brain to work in that way. And it's the same with tasting drinks or food, whatever it is. You're just learning to reprogram your brain to use more of the left hemisphere language centers. But unfortunately, what we do at a lot of consumer events, tastings and such, is just hand people a bunch of juggling balls.
Yeah.
And saying, go on then, show us a trick. And it's completely overwhelming. So to a lot of people, it just tastes of whiskey or wine or whatever it is. And to come back to the non-conscious versus the conscious parts of the brain, this is why I talk about flavour being created non-consciously, because the non-conscious brain is actually creating this whole thing. And we could talk about sub-threshold odours as well, because that gets really mind-blowing. And then it sends a projection, but it's an edited version of it. It's an edited, redacted version, because the non-conscious brain wants the conscious brain to stay within the limits of what the non-conscious brain wants it to do. So they say about 99% of decisions are made non-consciously. We try and justify them to ourselves consciously.
There's a rationalization.
Yeah. But the non-conscious and the conscious, they speak a different language. So the conscious brain can't really understand the non-conscious brain. It sends it this code message of specific instructions. It can't understand everything. And this is why flavour created non-consciously is completely abstract.
Yes.
It's just abstract perception.
Yeah.
It's an experience. It's like falling in love.
Yes.
How could you describe the feeling of falling in love?
So all we get to see is the sort of interpretation of that from the conscious brain in whatever words are available to us. Yeah.
Yeah, which is inherently limited.
Yeah.
And we're trying to express something completely abstract, like the sensation of love, with this language that's very specific and limited. It's trying to combine two completely different worlds, essentially. I understand a very weird reality with the consciousness that we have.
In some ways, I guess tasting notes are like a form of poetry in that sense, aren't they? It's taking a highly abstract, good poetry, taking a highly abstract concept like love and then assigning it words that usually in quite great economy can describe that feeling imperfectly, but pretty well, you know? And tasting notes, when they're good, I suppose, are something like that. It's a capture of, but because again, they're fundamentally flawed in that they're my tasting notes, not yours. And are you going to experience the same thing as me? Well, not exactly, no.
Yeah, exactly. And it will be different on different days.
Yeah.
And different on each time of the day as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful having a look at some of the tasting notes on Whiskey Mag, because they always have two tasters, and sometimes you read them, you wonder if they're talking about the same whiskey. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And most people in the drinks industry, or just consumers and people that love whiskey or whatever it is, they will identify with certain people because they feel that when they read their notes, it kind of aligns much more with their own experience. But other people are just way off, and they ignore them. So it just, people naturally align with certain people because they can relate to that, whereas other people, you think, are you talking about the same drink here?
Yeah, they're more closely similar to that person in terms of their sort of perception of the aromas and taste than they are with whoever the other guy is. Yeah, I get it. That does make sense. Okay. What about the environment? So how does that shape the way that we taste? What do we know about the music, temperature, the sort of setting itself, the materials we're in? Is it loud? Is it quiet?
Yeah, I mean, this is everything. So I predominantly what I do is I train industry teams on flavour, and a core principle is everything matters, every single thing. So there are these cross-modal correspondences, which you probably have heard of, whereby one sensory input impacts another sensory input. on a basic level, vanilla doesn't actually have any taste. It's 100% aroma. But the brain has learned to associate vanilla with sweetness, because often we have vanilla in custard or it's in ice creams. The brain says, okay, every time we have vanilla, I normally experience some sweet taste as well. And the brain loves shortcuts. This is the non-conscious brain. It loves shortcuts, so it applies rules of thumb to everything.
Assumptions.
Yeah. So when we smell vanilla, quite often it makes the product seem sweeter, even though there's the same amount of sugar in it, exactly the same. It'll smell sweeter with vanilla in it because of these cross-modal assumptions that we make. So it's the same with everything else, and we have these sort of embodied language that we use for things. These things that relate to bodily sensations, which I'm a big fan of using embodied language to express things like flavour in whiskey, because people understand it, like rough or smooth. Everybody in the world understands rough or smooth. It doesn't need a masterclass to explain it.
Yeah.
If you give somebody a drink and you say, is this rough or is it smooth? They'll be able to tell you without whatever experience they've got.
Yes.
Because we know it. We know what rough and smooth feels like. Same with roundedness or weight, heavy. But we make the same associations with colours and lighting as well.
And music, yeah.
Think about how we talk about things. You know, I'm feeling very buoyant today. I'm feeling really down. I'm heavy-hearted. I'm feeling jubilant. We use these expressions all the time. Generally, like light things that are like light in weight or light in colour, we associate with anything being positive and up and vibrant. And then things that are kind of heavy, we associate with the opposite. You know, whether it's dark colours, heavy weight, large things, the shape of things. It's remarkable. And then obviously we associate pointy shapes with sort of spicy flavours, and round shapes with sweet, softer flavours.
Charles Spence does that. Is it Kiki and Boba?
Boba and Kiki.
Boba and Kiki.
Yeah. I mean, it's
which sounds like an 80s double act. But Boba, I mean, you can tell Boba from the sound is sort of round and voluptuous, this creature. And Kiki is sharp and pointy.
Yeah.
Think like Monsters Inc., right? They're sort of like monsters. And they can be applied to everything, right? So you can give a sort of cue of you give someone a taste of a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, let's say, and they'll sip it and it'll be quite acidic and quite sharp. Is that Boba or is it Kiki?
Exactly.
Well, it's obviously Kiki, right?
Exactly.
And it's quite interesting to have these sort of abstract forms as a kind of way to compare how something makes you feel: the music, the color, the sound, or the taste.
Yeah. I was looking at the sculpture outside Liverpool Station, the ball, the silver ball thing on sticks.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what flavour is that?
Not without licking it.
Especially at dog height.
Yeah. I can tell you what flavour it's going to be. Forget about the shape of the damn thing. That's got dog piss on it.
Yeah. It's like that wine, that New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, cat's pee on a good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, actually, good segue there from Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah.
Exactly. But so, it's stuff that's so ingrained within us that it's so powerful. It's everything in the environment, the colours that we have around us, the lighting, the temperature as well, all these different textures, all of these things. But of course, there is a very personal, subjective component to that as well, because somebody may have a very strong association with a particular colour, or a strong association with a particular shape for whatever reason that is. So there is that
culturally or personally,
culturally and personally, yeah. But the Boba Kiki thing is culturally, the same across.
That's interesting
cultures.
Because obviously the words Boba and Kiki, I guess that Kiki, it's that sort of, you're kind of, it's from the back of the throat. It's sort of, and it's got that almost, you got to jut your head forward when you say it.
Yeah.
So that implies sharpness or spikiness.
Yeah.
And Boba, I mean, that's sort of, it's a different kind of noise, more round, it's soft around the edges, it's less defined. But it's interesting because obviously there's a myriad different languages around the world, and I guess that's where we're relating these sounds to, and yet it applies cross-culturally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that brands are becoming more aware of now. Certainly in terms of whiskey. Well, I mean, there's the big Guinness experience, isn't there, in Ireland? But we've got the Johnny Walker Princess Street. We've got the Ardbeg House. I mean, Macallan managed to turn their distillery into sort of a James Bond supervillain.
Stroke Teletubbies.
Yeah, stroke Teletubbies.
There's a lot of Boba going on there with that, those mans.
Yeah. But it's this whole like immersive experience. It's finally the I guess the consumer experience is catching up with the neuroscience.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's an interesting point when you're talking about brand homes. What colors are the walls? What music is playing? What are the materials that are there? What does it smell like when you walk in? Is it all wood paneling or is it, tartan? All of these different cues build a sort of perception of what that brand represents. And, that hopefully if they're doing their job properly, that's reflected on the bottle design and shape as well and labeling. And then it all plays into the whiskey experience, doesn't it? It's that when you actually come to taste and smell it. Yeah. I mean, if you go to the brand home and it's a shithole, and it's the whiskey, the experience of drinking the whiskey is going to be different.
Yeah.
Through all the different sensory stimuli that shithole is imparting into you.
Yeah, absolutely. And even small things. I do audits for visitor attractions for distilleries and such, and a big part of it is this concept called processing fluency. I don't know if you heard of processing.
No,
it comes from sort of neurodesign. And it's removing barriers to your cognitive processing. So it can only take one thing, and if that thing is at the start of the experience, that will set someone's mindset for the rest of the experience, and that will taint everything, and they will view that thing through that particular lens. So understanding how just small things, it could be not having a sign that tells people where to go, or the first thing that somebody there says to them, or whether that person is dressed in a tidy way, or just tiny how easy it is to open a door or not. If a door's got like a really heavy spring on it, it's just hard work to get in.
So annoying.
All these things, exactly, and it frames the whole experience.
Well, we know from studies that this is so important for restaurants and bars, that the initial interaction. It's actually the two. I don't know whether any of the new data has come out on this recently, but I remember reading this study 10 years ago. The two most important factors in a restaurant experience, it's not the food, it's not even the standard of service, it's the hello and it's the goodbye.
Yeah.
And they're so easy to fix. Yeah. Like, they don't cost anything to do. Train your staff to be very welcoming and make sure that whole initial experience is good. Like you say, signage and doors and the cleanliness of the place. As soon as someone walks in, you can then afford to fuck up the whole middle bit.
Yeah.
But if you then nail the exit at the end, then chances are there's people going to be like, wow, God, we'll go back there again. That guy was so nice, Shame the food was inedible and we had to send it back.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll go back again.
But it's so true. Yeah. And, in behavioral psychology, we have this primacy and recency effects, which is like a bias.
Yeah.
You know about this, whereby the first thing you remember, the last thing you remember, but everything in between is less important. Like the first thing, the last thing are important. With whiskey tastings, up to 4 whiskeys, this is very precise, up to 4 whiskeys, people remember the first whiskey most. More than 4 whiskeys, people remember the last whiskey most. There's actually a paper on this. So the bit in between isn't so important. And think back to a great meal you've had somewhere. And this is for all the people listening and watching. Think back to a great meal you had in a restaurant. What can you remember about it? What did the food taste like? Can you remember the actual experience of the food? Or can you remember the experience of being there, how people treated you, the service, the environment, the colors, the noise? What is it you remember? Is it the flavor? Or is it the actual experience of the environment?
Yeah, and it's going to be the environment, right? It's not the flavor.
Yeah, I mean, you can remember what you had.
Yeah, sure.
But you can't really remember specifically the flavor.
Well, that's just seems to be a sort of fundamental bug in the way the brain remembers things, right? Well, I mean, it's probably not a bug because I'm sure it's there by design for some reason or another.
Yeah.
Because maybe it would be kind of trippy if you were just able to drum up exactly what that grey mullet dish that you had yesterday tasted like. It would be weird, right?
Yeah.
But somehow the sort of feeling of being somewhere, the emotion of being somewhere is that little bit more tangible when you remember back.
Yeah.
But that, it probably is by design. I mean, does the body need to be able to remember exactly what something tasted like?
Not exactly.
No, but emotions, that's important because it will steer our future decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we were saying, that the non-conscious brain processes everything all the time. So it has to be very selective over how it processes information and applying these rules of thumbs to things. So therefore, it just views the last thing as the most important, or the first thing as the most important.
I mean, that's fascinating for someone who might be listening to this, who, let's say, is a brand ambassador for a whiskey company and is planning on doing a tasting event, and they've got 4 glasses. The order in which you put those glasses down is going to significantly reflect how people remember the event.
Yeah, exactly. But it's natural to put them in order of sort of flavor progression,
intensity. Yeah.
Rather than actually thinking how people will remember the experience.
Yeah.
And to build brand loyalty, how they remember it is more important than anything, because if it just blurs into the background of other tastings they've been to, other experiences they've had, they'll not remember it. What is it that makes that one stand out above everybody else? And that's how you create the commercial advantage, is by understanding the biases that shape experience, the biases that shape memories, and make something stand out and stick in someone's head. And it can just be one tiny thing, but how you shape the whole experience in a panoramic perspective is critical.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that if you're someone who's conducting a tasting, the way in which you linger on certain whiskies or emphasize their flavors can also play into this as well. If you make a big deal over one whiskey in particular and spend 20 minutes on this one singular dram, that's likely to stick in your mind, regardless of where it comes in the order.
Yeah, it really does. It's and also, a lot of people, especially today, I think a lot of people are sick of being kind of told what they should experience, told the flavors they should get. So it can be little things like that. If people feel like they're being dictated to, and the whole salesy thing. I expect you've been to events yourself, and you're like, "Oh, this is a bit salesy, isn't it?" And it just puts you off. Again, it just puts up that barrier, and then that taints the whole experience, because you're like, "It's great products, but I feel like I'm being really sold to here."
Yeah. I mean, that's another sort of learned thing that I guess whiskey tasters have to contend with. If you're someone who's experienced with doing tastings or going to whiskey bars or whiskey shows, distilleries, and you've seen the sales pitch, you've had the dram that you weren't expecting pulled out and got a treat, you've taken the cask sample out of the dunnage warehouse, all these little facets of what it's like to taste and experience whiskey will play into your kind of data set on what to expect and what you enjoy and what is kind of mundane and boring. So it's a really complex computation that's going on there when, let's say, you walk into a whiskey show and you walk up to a stand and someone's like, "Do you want a dram?" And whatever direction they start to take you, you'll be interpreting it as, this is a bit boring, I'm being sold to, or, oh, it's exciting, he's pulled something up from below the shelf.
Yeah.
All these little triggers that, like a kind of kid in a sweet shop, you'll be interpreting and deciding whether or not this is going to be enjoyable or not.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we're probably going to talk about sharing stuff later, but the power of oxytocin, which they call it the love hormone, it's a bit more complicated than that. But when you share something with someone, you give somebody something, they can't help but release oxytocin. You just can't help it. Your brain does it naturally. And oxytocin helps us to build relationships with people. So just the simple thing, if you're doing a tasting, give each person the first dram. Actually hand it to them. Don't just pour it and have it on the table. Hand it to them. That will release oxytocin in their brain, which naturally makes them more bonded to you. And then that sets the frame for the whole experience after that. Such a simple thing.
A little gift of whiskey.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's powerful. I mean, creating an emotional connection. Like you say, there's hormones there to actually back that up.
Yeah.
How important are the clothes that you're wearing?
Essential.
I don't know if they're essential. We want to talk about oxytocin. How does it affect what you're doing? What sort of clothes you're wearing, the materials, the fabrics, the weight?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a research study. I can't remember the researchers off the top of my head in the States where they used white coats, just normal white coats, and the students did something called a Stroop test, which is just a sort of a basic cognitive test.
Is that the colour one, Stroop test?
It's just questions, like quite straightforward questions you answer. But they told that everybody had a white coat to wear. They told one group that they were lab coats, science lab coats. They told another group they were artist smocks. And the third group didn't wear the coat at all. They just it was on a chair at the front. Unsurprisingly, the people that thought they were wearing lab coats did way better on the test. Way better.
Because they were pretending to be scientists.
Yeah, it framed their way of thinking.
Be smarter.
Just to be smarter. So yeah, it makes every difference. The colours that you wear, the feel of the fabric, again, the weight of things, feeling down, feeling buoyant. The whole thing, the warmth of it. And of course, clothing is just, we use it as a projection of ourselves, don't we? It's a way of expressing ourselves and signaling to the world who we want people to think that we are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
To sort of like on social media, when people project their social media avatar of themselves out into the world, that it's this perfect thing and wonderful. And clothing's the same. We wear clothing that portrays this image that we want the world to believe, and that impacts our own thinking.
Yeah, and when it comes to groups, the clothing that the rest of the members of the group are wearing as well,
yeah, exactly,
reflects on how much they've bothered to make an effort for this
the
delicious
peer
whiskey
pressure
you're drinking.
Yeah, exactly. Am I overdressed? Am I underdressed?
Yeah.
And, that person over there looks like they really know what they're talking about because they're wearing smart clothes. Or there's some research about how branded clothing really changes people's perception, and people seem more trustworthy if they're wearing, well-known, expensive brands.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It's like they're legit. They're wearing something authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the associations. But it's just a brand. It's just a symbol on an item of clothing. It's crazy, isn't it? How brand symbols change something like that. It's like was it Microsoft Apple thing? I can't remember if it's Microsoft Apple. It's Apple. It might be an IBM actually. I can't remember it. But basically they flashed the images to people so quickly that they weren't able to really even know they'd seen the brand image. But people did better in cognitive tests who had been flashed the Apple symbol than the IBM one. I'm pretty sure it was IBM. I may be wrong. But yeah, so even like our association of that brand image and what you're wearing, if your clothes have got that brand image on them or whatever it is, it changes our thinking. It changes our cognition. And that, of course, shapes perception.
Well, speaking of brands, are we ready to move on to actually looking at a bottle now, do you think?
I thought you'd never asked.
I'm not saying we're pouring it just yet.
It's nearly midday, for God's sake.
What do you want to try first?
Oh, well, yeah, whatever you recommend.
That's pretty strong. I think that on a heart cut is, what's this? They're all strong. No, they're all strong. We can add water.
Single cask.
Do you want to try the heart cut first?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the sort of next point, I guess, is because we're talking about brands.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at a bottle, it's like with cocktails, we always used to say the first sip is with the eyes.
Yeah.
You're already assessing what this drink is going to taste like. You're looking at, is the glass clean? Is the wash line correct on the cocktail? Is it garnished in an appropriate way? If it isn't garnished, why not? What does that say about the drink? How thick is the glass that it's served in? Has it got a stem? How heavy is it? Does it look cold? Has the ice half melted?
Yeah.
Is there some residue floating on top? Like all of these things are cues as to, it's not even so much like what the drink's going to taste like. I mean, it can give temperature cues, certainly. Color, of course, can give some indication of what it's going to taste like, and possibly false information.
It all does. It all gives you an indication.
Yeah.
Even how long did it take to make?
Yeah.
That sort of craft paradox. You know, if you believe that effort and time has gone into that drink, or did it just come out of a ready-mix bottle?
Yeah. The reason I say, certainly a lot of it is indication of what the flavor is going to feel like when you eventually come to taste it. But in some cases, it's more about the emotional response that you're going to ascribe to it. If it's a dirty glass, that affects the experience of flavor, but not the flavor specifically. It just makes you feel less happy with that drink, right? Or do you think it actually changes the perception of the flavor itself?
Well, the question is, what's the differentiation between the perception of flavor and flavor?
Yeah, well, I think on one of those, I'm saying the flavor in the sense that we can attempt to describe it with descriptive language. And the other one, I'm saying that there's an emotional element there's a crossover between the two for sure. Because if it's tasty, it makes me happy. And if it's not tasty, it makes me sad. But there's an emotional element to this that I would say sort of sits slightly outside of flavor. And that is one of, this glass is disgusting. I don't like this place anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not you include that as flavor, or whether it's the emotional response to the service of this drink that is related to flavor, but not in and of itself part of the flavor, I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting point. And it comes back to this whole thing of, is it possible for a drink to inherently have flavor or not? Mm. Does flavor exist outside of us? And if a whiskey inherently had flavor, then surely we could measure the flavor. But we can't. Mm. We can measure the chemicals, and we can predict how the experience of those chemicals will be, but we can't measure the flavor itself. And to your point of emotional context, the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system in our heads, processes emotions and memories and aromas and flavor. So it all happens in the same part of the brain. It's impossible to experience a flavor without experiencing an emotional response to that flavor.
Yeah.
Even if you imagine a flavor, even if you don't experience a product, but you just imagine a flavor, you will also have an emotional response just from the memory.
Yeah.
So this is how powerful it is. And this is why when people try a whiskey and it takes them back to this childhood memory of eating ice cream at Brighton seafront when they were 6 years old.
It's all coming from the same part of the brain.
All comes from the same part of the brain. So we can't really extract emotions from flavor itself. It's all the same thing. And I guess...
Yeah, but an emotion doesn't always have a flavor. So I can feel sad and it'd be nothing to do with eating and drinking things.
Exactly.
So I guess what I'm sort of getting at is that, let's say we're in a bar anyway. Let's say there's music playing and I don't like that music very much and my drink comes. Now, the fact I don't like that drink is probably going to affect the sensation of flavor that I experience. And even if it doesn't, the type of music will nudge flavor in one direction or another, as we've sort of already discussed. But independent of that, I can not like this place because I don't like the music, even before the drink arrives.
Yeah.
So that's a separate emotional response to that music.
Yeah.
Though it also, in the Venn diagram of this whole thing, they cross over, right?
Well, it's like a cake. So when you come into an environment and the way that you're greeted, the prices on the menu, the music, everything, that creates a layer of your cake. And then when you actually come to experiencing a drink and you experience flavor, the flavor becomes another layer of the cake, but it's the same cake. So it all layers on top of each other. And the conversations that you have creates another layer. Every single thing, the glassware creates another layer, but it's the same cake. And that cake is flavor. So we can take a layer of that cake, like the emotions from just being in the environment, and that has as a separate thing that gets built on. But the way that brain processes it all together is just one cake. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah. A nice explanation using cake. which has flavour, by the way.
Well, the cake doesn't. But...
well, no, the cake doesn't. Let's be clear here. The cake has no flavour. Just got chemicals.
Yeah. But, I don't... people could interpret it as saying, well, the chemistry is irrelevant and the people that make great whiskey are therefore irrelevant because if flavour's created in their head, then... But that's not the point at all. The point is that the chemistry is fundamental, and understanding how to make good chemistry is fundamental. But if we assume that the chemistry is flavour itself, it makes it seem like there's only one way to experience that. And if you don't experience it that way, then you're wrong. But if we shift our thinking into, okay, the experience of that chemistry, although the chemistry itself is fundamental, the chemistry is the stimuli. But the output is flavour, and that's created in the head.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you could say is the chemistry, the molecules that are in this whiskey are similar to the sound waves that are travelling through the air,
exactly.
Or the photons that are bouncing off the dark wall, or the heat that comes off this wood. They're all input stimuli that then get processed into flavour.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pull this out because we need to drink something. We're like nearly an hour. We're an hour in and we haven't had a drink, and this is supposed to be a tasting.
Yeah, I know. Like I say, it's
but no, this is all important groundwork. I
nearly
think
lunchtime
to get us there. I know.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's lots we can say about sort of the appearance of the bottle. We've sort of already touched on things like color and how that affects things.
Yeah.
Typography. I mean, what does the font tell us about the sort of liquid inside? What's the emotional response to it? Is it light and elegant? Is it bold? And I actually picked 3 whiskies that have got sort of different typefaces so that we can kind of assess maybe what the typography is sort of telling us about the liquid that's inside.
Yeah, totally. And it's, I guess the challenge specifically with independent bottlers is they're producing such a range of different products, such a range of different styles, that it's how do you create a branding that expresses the flavour of so many different things. But I think the Heart Cut have done an amazing job with this.
Yeah.
I mean, the name, the Heart Cut itself, I think is fantastic because anybody, you say heart to them and they just think of love and wonderful things and understanding what's gone into this brand. There's a lot of love and a lot of very thoughtful decisions being made. And they got the nice heart cutaway in there, and it's the type font is this kind of that slightly stenciled kind of thing. It's sort of engaging in that
quite modern as well. I mean,
quite modern,
it's
clean.
Stencil, but because we've actually got another one here that's sort of stencil, which is another indie bottling. That's got that stencil effect, but that's a bit more sort of like cask stencil, warehouse kind of thing. Whereas theirs has got that future. What's the font? Futura, is it? It's sort of that elegant, clean, slightly modernist.
I couldn't tell, but it is lovely and clean, isn't it? It's just straightforward and clean, but it's bold by maintaining elegance as well. It's not in your face bold, but I guess confident is probably a better word.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Of course, when you're an independent bottler and you're going to be bottling various styles of whiskey, it's going to be hard to communicate what each of those tastes like through typography. Of course, you can mix up colours on the labelling. But I mean, fundamentally, you're going to have sort of an art direction as to what your labels look like. I mean, you work for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society for many, many years. And of course, those bottles are all very, very similar. It's just a bit of text and numbers and stuff on the bottle that change. In fact, it's almost by design, I guess, in a way, isn't it? That you're sort of standardizing, controlling that experiment, and then the liquid speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is, I mean, obviously people know the numbers and all of this with the society bottlings, but actually, like we were talking about with the embodied language, when you have a whiskey that isn't called Glenrothes or Glenmorangie or whatever it is, it has some random name, like I like big butts, or
that is random.
What was my favourite one was the skunk roadkill and whiskey flavoured condoms.
I've not heard that one before.
But it's stuff that people can just grasp. It gives them a mental image and an emotion that goes with that mental image.
Yeah,
that's outside of just a brand name. And because they're all single casks, they can be so diverse from what people expect from that brand traditionally, that I think it's a rather lovely way of doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a statement that even someone who's never had whiskey before can understand and find some sort of idea or emotional concept about what this whiskey is going to taste like. Hopefully not like skunk and condoms, but
Yeah. It's quite accurate. That
was it? Yeah, yeah.
accurate.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sort of language. I mean, it's a little bit like what we do here at Black Rock with the cabinets, and each one is a flavor group. We just sort of communicate in terms of fruity, smoky, and now, of course, not all whiskies neatly sit into one of those bins.
Yeah.
They can traverse many of them, and so you have to take a little bit of license with it.
Yeah.
But I think, especially for inducting new people, and even people that know what they're doing, some tongue-in-cheek, like Scotch Malt Whisky Society with their statements, or some cue that is sort of universal and that anyone can appreciate, is a nice way to ingratiate someone into whiskey and to help them explore it in non-technical terms, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's about, isn't it?
That's what it's about. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we can get drawn into technical terms to fill the gaps in our own knowledge. I mean, I know this from personal experience. When I started doing whiskey tastings on my own with malt and copper, you don't really have the knowledge. You know, you don't really know what you're talking about. So you fill it with facts about still sizes and cask capacities and barley varietals and just useless information.
It's brilliant. There's so many brand ambassadors listening now going, oh shit, I've done that.
This is it. You know, rather than being able to just, because you have to start somewhere though, don't you? You have to start somewhere, but you don't have the experience and the depth of knowledge to talk about flavor on a deeper level, to talk about the brand on a deeper level. So you get drawn into just kind of filling it with just these ridiculous details. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people out there that love the details. But for the general public, it's pointless.
Yes.
Like what difference does it make whether this still capacity is 3,500 liters or 10,500? And like, what difference does it make? But myself, I used to fill the tastings with this kind of information because you're like, well, I need to talk about something and I don't know what else to talk about.
So what should we talk about to maybe not general public's obviously a broad term, but people who are maybe not that familiar with whiskey, who for all the technical details going to be completely useless. What should we focus on in a tasting, do you think?
I think the biggest thing is helping people to understand that how they experience it is how they experience it, and that's entirely up to them, and nobody can tell them otherwise. Equally, how they want to drink it is entirely up to them as well. Whether they want to put ice in it, Coca-Cola, coconut juice, whatever people want to do with it. If it tastes better to them, let them do it. And a lot of people are taking this approach that, you know, it's your whiskey, it's in your glass, do what you want with it as long as you're enjoying it. So I think that's the biggest thing, is helping people to understand it's entirely subjective. But I also think that one thing I certainly try to promote is the fact that you don't necessarily have to like the whiskey to enjoy it. If you come from the perspective of flavor and being curious about flavors, as I know you are, that anything, even if you don't like it, becomes a thing of fascination. Just like, what is that? How does that combine with that? And why is that so bizarre in that direction? And why is it I don't like that? What is it about it I don't like?
But interestingly, that sort of stretches the definition of like, doesn't it? Because that can become enjoyable, even though inherently it's not the most delicious thing for you, you know?
Exactly.
So you find yourself liking things that are just weird.
Yeah. We're looping back into this philosophical wormhole again, aren't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. It does transform dislike into pleasure.
Yeah, I had Serge Valentine on, and one of the questions I asked him is, do you find yourself increasingly attracted to weird whiskey? And he was like, yep. Because when you've tasted that many drams, the fascination or the enjoyment comes from, I've never had anything like that before, because you've had everything basically. And then to be finding new and interesting things it's miraculous, you know. It's like, wow, how? And then that's where the geekery comes in, because if you're that well versed in whiskey, you're like, well, how did that happen?
Yeah.
What conditions made that come together so that it tastes like marmalade or whatever it is, you know?
Oh, totally. And certainly, you know, when you go through a lot of casks in panels, one of the most exciting things is smelling something in a whiskey that you've never smelt in a whiskey before. You know, it's like, wow, I've never ever smelt that note in a whiskey. At least I can't remember. But that's really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, shall we start smelling whiskey?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
It's taken a little while, so there you go. So we should say it's a heart cut, and it's from St. George Distillery, in California. I'm assuming it's that because there's the English whiskey company as well, isn't there?
Yeah,
and
there is.
I'm not sure which one it is. It will say American.
I think St. George Spirits is the one. I presume we'll soon be able to tell when we taste it. Is the whiskey that, as you know yourself, it's got a very distinctive style. I'm talking about branding.
This is definitely America.
Yeah. One of the things that really impresses me with the St. George's Distillery is Alameda, isn't it? Alameda is because they do loads of different stuff. They do the gins, all the eau de vies, but there's this from a flavour perspective, from a sensory perspective. There's a DNA that runs through every single thing they do. And when you try them all side by side, you're like, wow, I can understand that this all has the same DNA in it. It's just such diverse drinks.
Yeah. I mean, for those listening and watching, I've interviewed Lance Winters. I can't remember when it was, but it was probably about 9 months ago. So go and check that one out because we discuss exactly that. This sort of red thread that goes through all of their products. I think it comes down to the fact that they began as eau de vie producers. It was all fruits and pears and what have you. Obviously, pears are fruits, but pears and plums, etc. And then from there, they shifted into making whiskey into gin, and they've done agave, they've done rum agricole, well, not rum agricole, but sugarcane juice rums. You name it, they've experimented with it, and I think it's that kind of philosophy of an eau de vie producer, of how you control fermentation and how you manage distillation to capture that sort of cross-section of that fruit that really is the sort of quintessence of the fruit itself, applied to malted barley, applied to agave, applied to sugarcane. And it's that clarity that they managed to manifest in the glass. That
it really is,
and it really is one of the best distilleries in the world.
Yeah.
They really do produce some absolutely incredible stuff. And to visit it as well is amazing because it's all in this old Air Force base, an aircraft hangar. So everything is there right in front of you. You've got all the stills sort of in an L shape, all the casks stacked behind it, their office, their tasting room is all in this one big space. So you can stand in one spot and effectively do an entire distillery tour.
Exactly. You don't need to go anywhere. And they've not sort of tried to gloss it up. It's very much industrial. You walk in there and you feel like you're in an industrial unit. It's not all polished and shiny and plaques and things hidden behind closed doors. Everything's just there. It's like you said, it's an aircraft hangar, and it's just there. But yeah, they do have this clarity of flavor and this depth. It's just these kind of layers on top of layers and layers and layers. It's kind of stuff you could just taste all day long.
Yeah. Color.
Yeah.
Now, color can be somewhat misleading, I think, or not necessarily misleading, but it can lead the witness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, so because you look at a color like that and you go, well, it's golden colored, so it's likely to smell caramelly or malty or have some of those aromas like vanilla that we associate with sweetness.
Yeah.
And then when you come to smell it, of course, that turns out to be partly true, usually. So the question is, how much is the color leading the witness and how much of it is actually there in the chemicals that are escaping the glass?
A remarkable amount is based on the color. So, I mean, how many times have you had a red wine cask matured whiskey that's got that slight pink hue to it?
Yeah.
First thing pops into your head is cherries.
Yeah.
And you're like, can I smell cherries? Or is it just the colour that's making me think I can smell cherries? Of course, there's no way of knowing. The two are then connected, and that is it. But there's a wonderful study some years ago now by a chap called Gilles Moreau in France. It was at the actually at the wine college in Bordeaux, and they took students to the wine college. So these are like wine students. They've dedicated their lives to studying wine. They know what they're talking about. And one week they gave them a flight of white wines and asked them just to smell them, not taste them, just to smell them, and write down descriptors from each, from a list. And the white wines, gooseberries and green apples, and cut grass, the usual things. 2 weeks later, they repeated the experiment with red wine and asked them again, pick them, and it's black cherries, and chocolate, these types of things. It was the same wines. They just dyed them with food colouring. It was the same wines that made them believe they were smelling completely different things.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, that study, often people say it was conducted on sommeliers, but as you say, it was wine students, is the sommeliers get out of jail free card. Because they're like, no, we had nothing to do with that.
It wasn't
but
us.
I suspect if you replicated that study with qualified sommeliers, whatever that means, you're going to find some number of people are equally fooled.
And it wasn't a small amount. It was all of them, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just...
But I mean, like... So that sort of calls into question, there's sort of two things potentially going on here. It might be both, I guess. One is the sort of learned experience of red wine and the associative taste and retronasal smell of it so powerfully linked that when you dye a white wine red, I taste red wine. And the other one is actually the taste and flavour, or the flavour, when I say flavour here, I'm talking about the experience of putting it in my mouth, of drinking red and white wine, actually far more similar than we think.
Yeah.
It's just that we segregate them through colour.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the Guinness and Special Brew in blind tastings. It's difficult to tell them apart.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, but so there was a study on the Lake District National Park. It's not entirely relevant, but it's really interesting. And they looked at online reviews for the Lake District. How are people talking about the Lake District when they write about it online? And they bracketed all of the words that they used in all the adjectives into either vision-based words, sound-based words, or smell-based words. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was 37,000 words out of this study. 37,000 words described how the park looked. 11,000 words described how the park sounded. And for how it smelt, it was 72.
Wow.
Now, you may say, okay, when you go to the park, you're probably not going to be bombarded by aromas, which is fine. But it's not like going to a restaurant where you're much more connected with smells. But, I mean, that's a huge difference. It really is. And that really demonstrates how our brain is wired to be so visually dominant and how that really leads the experience. Gastropornography. Did Charles Spence talk about that? Gastropornography. Yeah. It's. I suppose that this is distilled erotica, if you will. Sensory explicit content.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. The one that, rum is an interesting one where you get navy rums that have been intentionally darkened in color.
Yeah.
And often they're quite young rums, like really young, hardly any age on whatsoever. Now, the caramel coloring or molasses or whatever they're sticking in that rum can, I think, possibly contribute a little bit of flavor. But there's this strange situation that happens when you come to taste it, where your brain's trying to resolve the expectation of a dark, oaky tasting spirit, like you might get with a long-lived rum or whiskey or whatever, and the fact that actually this is a young rum underneath all of that clothing.
Yeah.
And that's what gives it that sort of unique flavor, I think, where you're trying to resolve these two opposing forces in the glass.
Yeah, absolutely. But but this is what I mean. It all becomes part of flavor. So that color of the rum becomes part of flavor.
Yes.
And it's like E150 with caramel coloring the whiskey, which is like, for the traditionalists, don't even talk about it. But it's part of the flavor. And if we consider it in terms of manipulation, so we're manipulating the flavor experience by adding coloring to the whiskey. What are we doing with casks then? because all of the colour is coming from the cask. So the cask is just another manipulation of colour. Of course, it does other things as well, but it's a manipulation of colour. E150 is a manipulation of colour.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from that perspective, you start to realise actually it's maybe more of an interesting thing to discuss rather than just shun it as being not pure, because it's just a manipulation. Casks are a manipulation. If you use a red wine cask, that's going to change the hue in a very specific way.
Yeah, but you're also changing the aromatics and the taste as well.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a tradition of putting whiskey into casks, and that's sort of part and parcel of what whiskey has to be under EU law and American law and everything. The colour is unavoidable. It's coming along from the ride. Yes, it's affecting the taste, but is the intention there to affect the taste by colour, or is it to affect it by the flavour of the barrel?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the answer would have to be both.
It probably would.
It would have to be both. Because let's face it, there's nothing that gets people more excited than a really mahogany, dark brown sherry cask whiskey. I mean, people love it. It was in a panel once. We had a bunch of 40-plus-year-old Glenfarclai in this panel. Glenfarclai. And it was like, wow, look at those. I mean, they were dark. It's like the bark of this table. But when we tasted it, it was so tannic, all of them, so tannic that they were undrinkable. But our expectations were such, like, wow, that is cool. And you look at a light whiskey and you're like, This is the thing with a lot of Islers, isn't it? That I find fascinating. Because quite often they're quite light in colour.
Yes.
But the flavours is off the scale.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful dichotomy.
Yeah, and again, it kind of it feeds into the diversity of whiskey and the surprise that you can have as well. Sometimes not nice surprises, sometimes they are nice surprises.
Yes.
Yeah, colour, I mean, because this is the thing, I think fundamentally it actually represents a pretty poor indicator of what the inherent flavour of the whiskey is. And yet it's unavoidable unless you're using blue tasting glasses or, drinking it out of a hip flask.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this whiskey here, because it's got a beautiful colour. But it's quite a sort of a toffee colour. It's like a richer yellow than you normally would see with a Scotch.
Yeah, it's got quite a lot of colour to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah.
But not in a sherry oak.
No. I think it's a virgin cask, it said on the bottle.
Oh, is it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's got that lovely rich golden, but then you're thinking, okay, is that then becoming part of my perception of the toffee fudgy butterscotch notes in that, because it all becomes just part of the same thing. It's the cake.
Yeah, the
color is just a layer of the cake.
Yeah,
that holds up everything else. But color just happens to be really important. And people talk about the legs and the tears and all this stuff as well, don't they? That
do people still talk about that?
I don't know. Probably. Probably. It used to be a huge thing, didn't it?
It did. Yeah.
But again, if you don't really know what else you're talking about, then you latch on to things that are ultimately meaningless.
What about the glass?
Yeah, again.
Got another hour.
Yeah, we were talking about this at the tasting last night. So, I mean, there's, coffee, the acceptance of coffee, the pleasantness of coffee. This is a lot of work that Charles Spencer's done. He probably spoke about it, how the mug itself changes this perception, and just sort of latch on.
We did talk about this. Yeah.
Segue with color a little bit as well. They found actually a pale colored cup, like a white coffee mug, enhances the richness of the flavor, which is counterintuitive because you think, well, you associate dark colors with richness.
It's contrast, isn't it?
Contrast.
Yeah.
It enhances the contrast, the darkness of the.
Looks even darker against the white cup. Yeah.
So it's complex and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So all these things make a huge difference. And the thing I find really curious with the drinks industry in general, but specifically with whiskey, I notice it a lot, is the way that glass design has been shaped to prioritize smelling.
So true.
Most glasses on the market, and they're wonderful, don't get me wrong, I'm not having a bash at whiskey glasses, but the dominant feature is to funnel those aromas to the nose, which you think, okay, well, that makes sense because we spend a lot of time smelling it rather than sipping it. It makes sense, doesn't it? You can smell this whiskey for as long as you want until it evaporates, but you can only sip it so many times until it's gone. But the risk of doing that is that in people's heads, subliminally, we're saying smelling is more important than flavour. And very often what happens is that people use flavour, the palate, I hate the word palate, but people use the word flavour on the palate to either contradict or confirm what they got on the nose.
And it's different.
And it's different. Rather than just enjoying the flavour, it's like, does this match the nose? Because the sign of a good whiskey is that it tastes similar to how it smells.
Yes.
If it's completely different, you think, well, that can't be a very good whiskey then.
Yeah, I get you. Yes, everything's geared up for nosing and not so much for tasting. And there's also this, I mean, and we'll get on to what's going on between the mouth and the nose and olfactory, retronasal smell and everything in a minute. But I think a lot of people are aware now that, 70%, 80% of flavor comes from smell rather than taste. And perhaps there's some confusion there around like, well, I'm smelling it in the glass like that, and that's affecting the taste. And of course, this orthonasal smell does affect what's going to happen when I put it in my mouth, because it's all part and parcel of the flavor experience. But it's the smelling that goes on that when this thing's in your mouth as you're exhaling that plays the bigger role in this thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, the flavor should be more important than the smell because it's combining more senses together. Smell is just smelling, essentially.
Sure.
But the flavor is combining so many different things.
Yeah.
So on that basis, it should be prioritized.
Yes.
More so than the aroma. And I think one of the issues behind it is this fact of people chasing credibility and expertise, in that as an industry, people like to look to the upper echelons of expertise and then mimic that. And if you look at that within whiskey, okay, what's the upper echelons of tasting in whiskey? And we think, okay, that's sensory analysis. And sensory analysis is why we have flavor wheels. It's why we have glasses like this, because they're designed for specific function. But sensory analysis is about control. It's about controlling the variables, controlling the environment, controlling the temperature, controlling the glass design, controlling the order of samples, which gives us that laboratory validity, but it's not real world validity. And that's a distinction that's important, that sensory analysis is all about control, because they're trying to produce data, essentially. They're trying to transform molecules into a subjective sensory experience, into perception, into words that we can use as data points that we can compare and track changes, track reformulations and such. So hence flavor wheels are created because everybody needs to talk the same language. We can't have everybody just saying whatever they want. So we've compressed the gazillions of different flavors in that dram into this one wheel because we need to make it comparable. But people look at that and think, that's how the professionals are doing it. That's what we should do. And people talk about, well, when you nose it, you should dilute it down to 20% ABV. And when you taste, it's 30% ABV. You can't be drinking cask strength spirits in a laboratory. It's very expensive equipment. Yeah. It's practical reasons as well. But people like to mimic it. And we like to use the flavor wheels. We like to use the same types of glasses. But it's a different tool for a different job. It's about control. It's about creating clean data. Whereas tasting, just whiskey tasting, is about enjoyment. It's about hedonism.
Yeah. So what you're saying really is that like bars should be optimizing glassware for the enjoyment in that surrounding, rather than using tasting glasses that might be used in a lab where someone's actually assessing the whiskey in a controlled environment.
Exactly. Exactly. So at home, my favorite whiskey glass is a tumbler. It's a really heavy tumbler, and I love it because I can just sit there and enjoy the flavor. I don't want to analyze it. I just want to enjoy it. You know, the oil of conversation,
Yeah,
isn't it?
sure.
And it just becomes part of your social environment and the conversations you're having and the whole thing.
One of the sponsors of the podcast is Denver and Liley. They're a Australian glassware manufacturer, and they produce a really beautiful whiskey tumbler. It's quite wide. You can fit ice through the top of it if you wanted to, and it splays out. It's sort of like, if you think like a Glencairn, but someone squashed it and made it wider.
Yeah.
So it's got a kind of heavy base.
Someone melted it.
Yeah.
Left it out in the sun.
It's bigger volume than a Glencairn as well, because so you can take ice.
Yeah.
But I think it actually strikes a really nice balance of looking like a sort of quintessential nosing glass, but having a bit more function as a high-value tasting glass that can actually help support a really nice experience.
Yeah.
This is probably the moment where I'll put the advert in for that piece of glassware. It'll fit really, really nicely. But yeah, I get your point. I suppose one pushback is, as you say, let's say the people that come into this bar, we want them to have a great time. We want their experience to be wonderful. We want their whiskey to taste as good as it can. If we give them a glass like this, and given that most of the people that come in here are fairly switched on whiskey drinkers, they get to feel like they are the sensory analysis of the whiskey. They get to feel like they are being given this controlled experiment, and they are tasked with nosing it.
Yeah.
And so that builds value to that particular experience in this particular environment, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because of the associations.
Yes.
Because of the associations of expertise.
Exactly.
And we've been told that experts use these kind of glasses, so that's what we should use if you want to feel like an expert. But I guess it's up to people to educate people and show that there's a different way, there's more to it than that. To compound the issue, I suppose, this is one of the other challenges. There's not a one-size-fits-all. It's like with cocktails. You wouldn't just have one glass for cocktails. It radically changes the experience, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's the same for whiskey, because one of the things I love about whiskey, and sherry for that matter, if you like sherry, is that the range of flavors is so vast. You know, it goes from very light, easy, honeyed, through these like rich depths and abysses of flavor, to these sort of, you know, hospital ambulances doing donuts around seaside car parks, and anything in between. So to have one glass design that's for everything, it seems bonkers to me. I like what Riedel did with
different glasses
the wine
for
glass.
different wine types.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, it's not practical, is it?
No.
You're running a bar. You need a glass that's going to like stand up to abuse. You know, it's going to stand up to be knocked over. It needs to go in a dishwasher. It needs to be able to fit on a shelf. You know, all of these other factors come into it. You just can't have all these different glasses. It's not practical, is it?
Yeah, I guess if you're at home and you've got the appetite for it and the bank balance to support it, there's no reason why you can't have a collection of whiskey glasses and do the tests yourself to see where, you know, a young peated like maritime Islay whiskey is best put, and versus a, you know, heavily sherried whiskey versus a bourbon versus whatever else. Try them in different glasses and see which one supports the aromas and tastes and experience of drinking that whiskey the best.
Yeah, and we can go even deeper. The ideal glass for a specific whiskey will change from day to day as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because you're a different person.
Yeah.
And sometimes we may want to enhance the spiciness. Sometimes we may want to enhance the elegantness. You know, I do love stemmed glasses because it does have that it's like the champagne flute thing, moving away from the traditional coupe style glasses. You know, it has that elegance to it, and you can see the bubbles in the flute and all this. And yeah, there's something very elegant about a stemmed glass versus a tumbler. It's a completely different cognitive experience. But yeah, I'm fascinated by glass designs. I'm one of these people that just collects weird, you know, you go around charity shops, you find the weirdest glasses in charity shops. Oh, that'd be great for this specific thing.
I did an episode with a archaeologist based in Porto, where there's a museum of glassware, the biggest in the world.
Wow.
And took a load of kit over there and we recorded in the museum. Anyway, one of the oldest pieces they have is an Egyptian piece of stemware, and it's modeled on an orchid, and it looks like one of these.
Right.
And then you're like, hold on a second. This is called a stem. Are we in fact modelling all stemware on flowers? And no one's sort of made the connection, even though we've already got a name for this, which is part of a flower.
Yeah.
And you do stuff, because I mean, it looks like a tulip, right? Or,
Exactly.
you know, and that's, you know, there's a natural beauty there that we associate with the natural world. You put liquid in it and it creates this experience of having a product of agriculture and nature, wood and barley and water, held in this flower-shaped device that we sip from like fairies, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah. And also the familiarity of design is so important, that we're used to seeing this shape in nature. It's not something that's new and abstract to us. It's all sorts. Yeah. It's like the whole Amazon smiley thing.
Yes.
All of this, you know, it's just it's so familiar that we accept it because it is familiar.
Well, I just finished mine and we didn't even get on to smelling yet, really. So I might have to pour another one of something else.
It's a great dram.
It's really nice, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of good things more we could say about St. George, but we'll leave it there. But there's a really interesting floral aroma on that. I know we've just been talking about flowers and stemware, but there's something kind of elderflowery or
I know what you mean.
Yeah, like honeysuckle or something. Yeah.
A sweet honeyed floral thing.
Yeah. It's really, really nice.
It's beautiful. Like I say, just layers and layers and layers. You can dig into that one.
All right, let's try something else. And maybe let's talk a bit about how to smell whiskey. So even though we've just finished that glass. And what you know,
thank you.
The purpose of it, I mean, why do we bother smelling it? At the end of the day, it's going inside our bodies. And,
exactly.
And the olfactory epithelium is going to do its work and going to transmit those aromas up into our brain where it will mix with taste and all these other things. Why are we sitting there smelling it in the first place? What's the point?
Well, it's programming, isn't it? I mean, when we think about it, cheers. The nose is designed to detect stuff in the world. So, you know, we've mentioned retronasal olfaction and orthonasal olfaction. I just call it outer nose and inner nose. I think it makes more sense in people's heads. So the outer nose, I mean, this is the interesting thing, that it's the same smell receptors inside your nasal cavity, inside my nasal cavity as well. We have just the one group of smell receptors that we use for all smells. The route to those smells changes. When you sniff, you're nosing, where you take a sip and it's traveling up the back of the throat into the nasal cavity that way. The route changes, but it's the same receptors. Now, changing the route changes how the brain processes the information from those receptors, which is the remarkable thing. So when we smell, I relate it to a search dog, like a spaniel on Ritalin, that the nose is designed, when we're just smelling, to go out into the world and find stuff. And once it's found stuff, figure out if it's a danger or something good. Should we discard it and run away, or should we consume that thing?
Yeah.
That's what its job is to do. So when we're smelling, it's just following a natural path of harm detection, essentially. It's like if you go to the fridge and you find a pint of milk at the back of the fridge of an undisclosed length of time.
You'd be mad not to smell it first.
Exactly.
It is surprising if you start to take note of the amount of times you smell things in the day to test their worthiness and freshness and chance that they're going to be off. You do it a lot more than you think. And it's a very animalistic thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason, given how we've sort of been cultured and civilized, we sort of almost willfully ignore the fact that we are walking around the world behaving like animals most of the time.
Well, we are. I mean, it is studied by Gorodisky and colleagues where they were looking to understand the breathing habits between normosmics and anosmics. So normosmics are people that just breathe normally or smell things normally. Anosmics are people that can't smell things normally. And this has been a big problem from COVID. It hit people's receptors and they just couldn't smell stuff the same. So they wanted to see, okay, one's ability to actually smell odors, does that impact how you breathe? But something that came out of this study that was unexpected was that they realized that people that smell normally, normosmics, they make around 240 additional sniffs per minute.
Wow.
Completely non-consciously. They're unaware of it. They have no idea they're doing it. So we make, in an odorous environment, if you do it in an odor-free environment, it drops off. But in an environment that has some sort of odor, not like a strong odor, but just an odor, up to 240 additional environment scanning sniffs per minute.
So this is not the same as breaths, obviously, because no one's breathing that much. It's just these micro impulses of
sniffs.
air. And it's like because dogs obviously do it quite audibly, don't they?
Yeah. Exactly.
But
they do that to disrupt the odors. So they breathe in and out.
Displacing it.
Exactly. They're breathing onto something.
Yeah. Oh, to make it more volatile.
Exactly. Right. To disrupt the chemicals on there and push them into the air, and then they sniff them back in
and
again.
And then they can get a finer assessment of what it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why they do that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So they're creating sort of turbulence to,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And further, there's loads of research on sub-threshold odors. So essentially, if you take 2 glasses of water that are identical, and into one of them you put, let's say, some strawberry aroma, but in such a tiny quantity you can't smell it, and you give the people the 2 glasses, they can't differentiate between them. They can't spot which one's got the strawberry in it. But when you do the same thing and you scan their brains, the brain reacts differently to the one with the odor in it. So the implication is that we're smelling stuff that we're not consciously aware of, but the non-conscious brain is aware of
and
it.
It's like, this isn't that important to you, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's some remarkable things that come off the back of this, because it suggests, for one thing, the nose is a lot more sensitive than we think it is.
Yeah.
Because clearly the brain is detecting odors we're never consciously aware of, we can't describe them. The second thing is, which feeds into what I think about flavour being a non-conscious process. So the brain is processing stuff we're never aware of, and then it's feeding an edited version. And then the third thing is, it's highly likely in this glass of whiskey or in any flavour product that there are chemicals in here in such tiny concentrations we could never detect them. They're in such tiny concentrations GCMS could never detect them. So we are entirely unaware whether they're there or not.
No one knows.
We're unable to prove whether they're there or not, but they're probably being picked up by a non-conscious brain, shaping the perception of flavour before sending that to the conscious brain.
Yeah, that's big, isn't it? And it also sort of bodes the question: can you train yourself to actually consciously experience some of these sub-threshold chemicals, so that just for pure hedonistic pleasure of experiencing a greater breadth of flavour?
Yeah, familiarity enhances identification.
Okay.
So the more familiar you are with something, the more easily you'll be able to identify it. So in theory, yes, it would be purely dependent on the concentrations and your own thresholds, because we have different thresholds for everything. So it's a complicated thing to work out.
And I guess, so the trick then is exposure. You need to be exposed to these aromas so that you become familiar with them, and then potentially can detect them in smaller concentrations.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, coming back to expertise is category specific. Yeah. So studies have shown a wine expert taster is no better than a novice at tasting whiskey, and vice versa, because they've learned the vocabulary that's specific to that category. And it's all about labeling.
Not transferable necessarily.
Exactly. It's not necessarily transferable. Sometimes, obviously, there are flavors that are transferable. Your specific compounds that are transferable, but it's specific to the category.
Yeah, and also, if there is something familiar that you do have the language for, it may not be the appropriate language for that category because it may be confused by other things that are going on.
Yeah.
So sort of note of straw-like aroma that you pick up in a Chardonnay, when you pick that same thing up in whiskey, it's familiar, but straw is not quite the appropriate language because in concert with the other aromas and tastes, it doesn't quite play like that. Am I making any sense there? I don't know.
It depends on what you mean by appropriate, because I've heard remarkable wine conversations where somebody said, "Oh, I get this specific note in this wine," and then a debate occurs whether it's appropriate to smell that in a wine, like whether you're allowed to smell a particular aroma or not. Somebody can tell you,
because it is what you smell, isn't it?
Yeah, it's entirely objective. So
subjective, sure. Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying with the appropriateness?
It's kind of what I'm saying. I guess, as you say, I mean, when we talk about what the flavour of something, and if there's a group of us, the reason there's a debate is because we're trying to hone in on the truth there, right?
Yeah.
And of course, as we've already discussed, there kind of isn't a truth because, but nevertheless, that's the game. That's the sport we're playing. Now, if we had, say, 20 people around this table and we're nosing a whiskey and there's one grain of truth, in inverted commas, that we can all hone in on, this smells and tastes of vanilla, for example. In fact, that's probably a pretty good example because everyone's pretty sensitive to it and it crops up quite a lot. But someone from outside of the whiskey field comes in and they go, well, to me, that actually smells like wood rather than vanilla.
Yeah.
Now, they don't have the experience of whiskey. Their language is slightly different. They may be an expert in wine or something else. It's still what they're smelling and tasting. That's their truth, right? But with a panel of experts, we can probably say that their description is less accurate than everyone else's. I'm not sure if that's true or not. And it does sort of come down to philosophy again, I suppose. Like, what is true? Is there any truth there?
Yeah.
Interpretation is the only truth we really have.
Yeah.
But in the game of trying to become more precise about what is actually going on in that glass, I suspect that some people can be more right than others.
No.
Even as I said it, I knew you were going to disagree with me.
Well, it's subjective.
Yeah, it's subjective.
It's subjective.
Yeah.
It's like saying that everybody should enjoy a specific movie, and if you don't, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Or experience a movie in a particular way. I mean, it's...
Yeah, but that kind of sounds preference.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about here is, so, I mean, can we all agree the color red is red, right? Because that's also subjective.
Yeah. Okay. So we get into analytical senses and synthetic senses. So vision is an analytical sense. You see the color red, the light's reflected into your eyes. That's what you experience. For most people, you experience it. Well, we assume we experience it in a similar way. For some people, obviously, have some sort of color blindness, deficiency, it's going to be a different experience. But for the large part, it's an analytic sense. We just see that one thing and we can break it apart the same way we can look at the tap on this table. Analytically, we can break this into component parts very, very easily. We can identify the color or the different colors on there. We can identify the shape of on there. We can identify the different components. It's very, very easy. It's analytic. Now, synthetic is what flavor is. It's the combinations of things that come together. So, for example, with whiskey, you could smell this whiskey and say, well, I get caramel popcorn, I get oak, and I get, let's say, vanilla. These are analytical things. The synthetic thing is to smell it and say, I smell whiskey, because your brain has created a whole from the individual parts. So what I'm trying to get to is that vision is analytic because it's very good at identifying individual parts. That's how it works. But flavor is a different type of sense, if we can call it a sense, because it's synthetic. Certainly aroma, smell, if you want to talk about one sense, is synthetic because it's combining lots of different molecules together to create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. So when you smell whiskey, for example, there's lots of different volatile molecules coming off of that. And it's the specific combination, and not just the combination of molecules, but the time scale of when they hit your receptors helps us to identify what it is, as a whole, and then the analytical side comes in as well. Then we can start to break down the wholes into parts, but the parts are still made up of multiple molecules.
Yeah, I've got you. What about taste then? Because taste has a limited number of sensations. So how does that play into that model?
That's analytical.
Right.
That's analytical because generally, if we think about sweet and sour, it's sweet and it's sour.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet and sour don't combine to create something new. It's just sweet and sour at the same time. One of the things I love about sour cocktails is the way they mess with your head, because it's that sweet and sour thing at the same time, which don't normally happen together. And your brain kind of goes, oh, what's going on?
They do in apples.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I think sour cocktails, I've been banging on that for years. I think a lot of cocktails, especially when they involve citrus juice, they're actually just replicating fruit.
Yes.
And that's the sort of basis of comparison. That's how we know if they're balanced as well.
But I guess with a cocktail, it turns up the volume.
Yes, it's certainly more concentrated. Depending on your apple variety. But yes, it's pretty concentrated. Yeah.
So this is why it's slightly different. With comparing, say, vision or hearing to flavor to aroma, because the brain is looking at it in a different way. And this is one of the challenges with someone new coming to a product and experiencing it, because they're just programmed to look at things as wholes. When they smell it, when they take a sip and it becomes flavor, they're just used to looking at it as a whole. So they say, well, it just tastes like whiskey. Either like it or don't. It's either rough or smooth. That's the level of differentiation. With practice, you can engage the left hemisphere and start to become more analytical with that and say, okay, I get the whole, but then I can start to break the whole apart and analyze it and actually extract specific things from that whole. So two separate things. Quite interesting.
So just to summarize what you said, just so I'm clear that I understand, what you're saying is that aroma is synthetic. It's because it's a combination of various different things that are going on.
And analytic.
And analytic, because you can select one
with practice you can break the whole apart.
Sure. Okay. And then flavor obviously is synthetic because it's combining all of these different things together, but most of the other sensations that are contributing to flavor are analytic. Right, got it. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So taste is analytic, mouthfeel is analytic.
Good segue. Let's talk about mouthfeel.
Sure.
Actually, do you want to talk about? We're touching on taste here, obviously. We've talked a bit about aroma. In the interest of time, we should probably move on to taste and texture and mouthfeel and heat and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We don't, especially mouthfeel, we don't talk about enough in whiskey terms. Wine's much better at talking about mouthfeel, but a lot of people don't even know what mouthfeel is. But this is kind of loop right back. A lot of people don't know what flavor is. Go around a whiskey festival and ask people what is flavor, and you'll get fantastic answers. But there's a lot of confusion because we don't talk about it enough. But yeah, taste is remarkable. It's so easy to overlook taste, and a big thing I love doing with the training is give people nose clips.
Yes,
because one of the challenges, obviously, when you take a sip of something, it becomes that whole thing. It becomes flavor, and it's very easy for the retronasal, the inner nose, to dominate that experience. And it becomes so all-encompassing that when you say to someone, what type of flavors do you get? They're like, there's so much going on and it's constantly changing. So when we talk about mouthfeel, how do you differentiate mouthfeel from other sensations? We just put nose clip on. Or pinch your nose. It's quite difficult to sip and pinch your nose. But you can take a sip and then pinch your nose.
Your hand gets in the way of the glass.
Exactly. Yeah. But it really demonstrates how much of the experience in your mouth is flavor. And a lot of people, some people quote the 80-20 thing, 80% is aroma. It's nonsense. When you actually break flavor down and you look at other cognitive functions such as emotions and experience and anticipation and color, all of this sounds, as a percentage, you probably end up with aroma being somewhere more like 40%.
Yeah, because there's so many other factors that have got to fill in the rest of it, not just taste.
But you can't quantify it. How can you?
And of course, it's variable depending on what the circumstances, right? The actual thing you're eating and drinking and all those other factors.
So it's impossible to put a number on it.
I know. I always thought it was absolutely absurd to sort of say 70, 80, 90% or whatever, when clearly the whole thing is variable. You know?
Exactly. So, but when you put a nose peg on or you pinch your nose, you can separate the aroma from the experience, the inner nose, and you can focus on taste and mouthfeel, which is a really valuable thing to do. So we tend to think of taste being quite basic: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. There's a strong argument for fatty being a taste as well. We have fat receptive neurons in the mouth. So we have neurons that detect fattiness as a taste, not as a sliding friction sensation, but actually as a taste. And some people are proposing there's maybe as many as 20 tastes that we detect. But I guess
how are they defined exactly? Purely by neurological activity when something's in the mouth?
Yeah, essentially.
So again, subconscious, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Scan people's brains
Yeah.
and see what happens. But you have to have the receptors for it in the mouth.
I guess one of the interesting things about the mouth is, as you say, it kind of gets downplayed in the face of aroma and other things. But of course, it's where everything seems to be happening, right? The brain routes all of the experience back to the mouth, as if all of this stuff has originated there.
Exactly.
I guess because that's where we're putting the thing, and if something goes wrong, we need to know that that's the problem there. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. And we talk about this whole palate thing, and but if you think about palate in a literal sense, if you wanted to understand how a product was on your palate, you'd have to sip it while standing on your head. Because
it's okay.
I mean, why don't we just call it flavour? Again, why do we complicate things? Why do we call it palate? Palate means the same as flavour. So why don't we just say, how is the flavour of this? Why do we have to use the word palate? It's meaningless. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's used in like whiskey literature as like, I finished smelling this thing and now I'm putting it in my mouth. Whereas that doesn't sound very nice. Palate seems to apparently seems to be more of a sort of romantic word.
But we could just say flavour.
Yeah, we could.
Because it's the same. Putting it in your mouth creates the flavour.
Yeah.
So we could just say flavour.
We could. Yes.
But taste.
Mm-hmm.
Taste is remarkable. And specifically for aged spirits, probably the most interesting taste is bitterness. Of course, for beer, cocktails as well. And one of the interesting things is, I expect you probably know this already, that whereas for sweetness, we essentially have 2 types of taste receptors. For bitterness, we have 25 in that family. So our ability to detect bitterness is really nuanced, which makes sense because generally toxins are bitter. So we're predisposed to identify those before we actually swallow them.
Yeah.
But we overlook it because it's a sort of a dirty word, isn't it?
Yeah.
People don't want a whiskey to be bitter. So we generally avoid talking about the bitterness, but it's so nuanced. The astringency of something, that bitter taste is so nuanced in there that it's something we should talk about a lot more, I think, because it could be green leafy bitterness. It could be like a real barky, woody bitterness. It could be like aspirin bitterness. All types of bitterness come into play, and it's a remarkable thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is talked about a lot in cocktails. Obviously, we have cocktail bitters and all the different Amaros and things like that. It's and you have it in coffee and you have it in chocolate. But it's. I mean, I guess bitterness is not something that we tend to expect to find in whiskey. Certainly not in large or even detectable quantities, really, because it would suggest a defect, right? Something's gone wrong,
Yeah.
But and when you have bitterness, you normally need to have a little bit more sweetness to kind of counteract that, or saltiness.
Which you don't really get.
No.
In whiskey.
No.
Salt's fascinating as well because the way that salt works is we have dedicated salt receptors, obviously, but they only work up to a certain concentration of salt. When salt concentration in the mouth goes above that, if you put too much salt in, it engages the bitter taste receptors instead.
Didn't know that.
So this is why a little bit of salt makes things flavoursome, but too much salt makes them disgusting because it actually switches which receptors are being used to detect the salt.
Because it's telling you you're consuming too much salt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's mad.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the thing that's going around in my head is what's the cutoff, and how does the body create that boundary between those receptors
How did it
and
work
those
it out?
receptors?
Yeah.
How does it happen?
Like, it's done some calculations on how much, if he carries on eating salt at this level, he's going to be dead in 5 hours. We need to switch the bitterness now.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. This is great, by the way. I love rye whiskies, and I love rye whiskies like this because I find them really filthy.
Yeah, it's got a dirtiness to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, that grubby kind of
and
rye.
then ironically, it's sort of like Beauty and the Beast. It's been put into a Chardonnay cask to try and soften it out a little bit. So it's East London Liquor Company's London Rye. It's good.
It's wonderful.
I think
bold label.
Bold. I think oh God, what's his name? Jonathan Glazer from previous Comic Box. He's been doing some stuff with them recently. I don't know if it's this particular one, but Alex from East London Liquor Company gave me a sample at a whiskey show, and it was a collab they'd done with John Glazer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
But again, this is what's wonderful about whiskey, isn't it? That it's that sometimes you just find really interesting things. And coming back to the sort of rough or smooth thing, that generally we don't like a whiskey to be rough. Everybody wants a whiskey to be smooth because that's how we think quality tastes.
Yeah, but do you think that's just trained language around whiskey, that smoothness?
To a degree. But, I think if you want smooth, have a pina colada.
Yeah.
Don't have a whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I drink whiskey because it takes me on a journey. And sometimes it's riding a bit of a wild bull.
But the people who say smooth are usually people who don't drink that much whiskey, I would say. And so whiskey sits at the sort of far reaches of their tolerance of intensity. And so what's desirable for them? Something that's more tolerable, and that would be smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point.
Okay, cool. So mouthfeel. Mouthfeel.
Yeah.
And because this is the thing, like, again, the sort of what goes on in the palate, I'm triggering you intentionally on purpose here, is again often downplayed. And we've talked about taste, but there's so much going on here in terms of temperature, like literally the temperature, but also the heat from the alcohol, that prickle on the tongue or the back of the throat, the viscosity of the liquid as it moves around, and then of course things like the finish and what flavors come through afterwards and how it sits physically in you after you've drunk it. So there's actually like and probably there's more stuff than that too. So there's a hell of a lot going on there in the mouth, isn't there? Yeah,
tons. And generally, when we talk about mouthfeel, people say textures. They're used interchangeably.
Yeah.
Textures and mouth, but they're not.
Yeah,
they're
Charles Spence picked me up on this, I remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good man.
Different things.
Yeah, they are completely different.
Yeah.
Textures is a part of mouthfeel. And some people say, oh, mouthfeel is just this nonsense word. But I like mouthfeel because it's very easy to grasp. It's just the feel within the mouth. And we can break it apart more technically, but essentially, you could say oral sensations, but it's kind of a bit wanky, So I like the word mouthfeel. But textures is only one part of it. And when we talk about textures, silky, gritty, viscous, all these things are textures that go on inside the mouth. It's the feel. It's what we call somatosensation. It's the same sense as touching things with your fingers. Mm-hmm. How does it feel? And that's one type of mouthfeel that we have in going on in there. The other part is called chemesthesis, just the chemical reactions going on. And that's when we experience things like burning, cooling, effervescence to a degree as well, which is quite an interesting one. Although effervescence really is a taste rather than mouth. About the whole carbon dioxide.
It's carbonic acid.
Yeah, which is remarkable. We have this enzyme, the carbonic amylase that converts the carbonic acid, the carbon dioxide and carbonic acid. You taste it.
Yeah, it's
remarkable.
The prickle is more from that acid than the bursting of the bubble itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have the chemical sensations, burning, cooling, and fizziness as well to a degree. And then we have the touch, somatosensation things. How does it actually feel? an interesting part within that is the differentiation between viscosity and fattiness, that they often get conflated. Whereas viscosity is the actual, the feeling of it. It's like the difference between cream and milk. Cream is more viscous than milk. But then we have fattiness. We have these neurons that detect fattiness, which is more to do with the lubricity of the saliva, how lubricated your mouth feels. So they're two different things. One's like the thickness of the liquid. The other is how dry or lubricated your mouth feels. And it's all to do with the proteins in the saliva. And this is where tannins come in.
Yeah, and astringency, right?
Astringency.
Because who was it? Ariel Johnson I was talking to, and she was saying that astringency is basically a delubing of your palate.
Exactly.
Yeah, because enzymes break down the proteins. No, is that right? In the saliva, and then
the basically the tannins build bridges between the proteins.
Right.
So they clump the proteins together, which means they kind of end up in these kind of balls, and it just feels less lubricated because of that, because they're not separated. They get clumped together. In addition, quite recent research has looked at how actually tannins impact this particular compound that regulates the flow of water in and out of the cells. It impacts that. It essentially stops the cells from being hydrated. So the cells that line the mouth literally become dehydrated because they can't get the moisture into the cell. So there's tannins work on two fronts in that respect.
Got you. Okay.
Additionally, I don't know if you're into olive oil particularly.
I do like olive oil. Yeah, yeah.
You had the ones that really sting, that kind of peppery thing at the back of the throat. This is interesting
Picante,
as well.
yeah.
Because that's a different...
Is it what we call them? Picante olive oils? Spicy ones?
Yeah, do you know what?
I think they do.
I'm not as much of an expert in the terminology, but I do know that these there's a particular compound in olive oil, the name of which escapes me just now. It'll come to me. That impacts particular receptors in the mouth that gives it that. It's the chemesthetic receptors. It gives it that spicy thing. But these particular receptors are concentrated at the back of the throat. So this is why when you have a spicy olive oil, it hits you at the back of the throat rather than in the mouth itself. It hits you at the back of the throat because that's where these receptors are concentrated.
It's so interesting, the different locations of different receptors attuned to different different products and different chemicals in those products, and how some are further back, some are more up at the top of the throat, and some are on the side and everything. Yeah. And this sort of what evolutionarily has caused them to be in those particular locations and not others. I mean, maybe it's just real estate space. Like it's like, well, we've filled up that bit. There's more room down there. Exactly. We can build them there.
That's it. Where are we going to go next? Well, where's up for sale? Let's have a look. Yeah, I mean, but the implication is though that because often for practical reasons in professional analysis, you always have to split the samples really, but you're not engaging the same receptors in the same way. So this is one of the reasons why there's always a gap between sensory analysis and the consumer experience.
The actual real
can never
experience.
Be replicated.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of just swallowing them responsibly, of course.
Yeah.
But you get the full experience then because there's so much more. Like you mentioned earlier, you can feel the whole thing going down into your stomach, and that's receptors as well that are picking up all of that. It's remarkable.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Like whenever I can, and obviously not if I'm driving or whatever, I will always swallow, take small amounts, because I just think there's something, especially with spirits, there's something about as it goes down and as it sits there that is part of that experience, especially when you're talking about higher ABV spirits as well, and the way that sits, not just in the stomach but and the chest, but like sort of at the back of the throat, which of course it never gets to if you're spitting, that has a profound effect on the overall experience of that dram. Yeah,
it really does. And then the finish as well, of course, because we talk about finish as if it's this sort of the residual sensations, but it isn't. It's completely different. It's a changing process. So we've not spoken about enzymes enough, have we, or microbiota?
Definitely haven't.
And oral pH.
Go on.
Because this gets really, again, like, why don't we talk about this more? So our mouth is full of enzymes. Obviously, it's full of, the enzymes are the first stage of digestion.
Did something just turn off then?
I
felt like lights went off.
I didn't notice anything.
Is it nighttime outside?
How
long have we been going?
I don't know.
I thought something just turned off then. That was that light behind you did.
Oh, okay.
Let me just plug another battery in. Finish. Yes.
Yeah.
Finish. Literally, we need to finish. No, finish.
So we have enzymes, we have microbiota, we have oral pH. And this is different for everybody. We have different enzymes, we have different balance of enzymes, we have a different microbiota. Anybody that has do you have a dog?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll be sharing microbiota with your dog, which is wonderful.
Yeah. We do it every day.
Yes. And your pH is different. Everybody has a slightly different oral pH. It's within a bracket, but everybody has a slightly different one. And they're all interrelated. So we don't talk about this enough in tasting circles, that when you take a sip of a product, it becomes a different product instantly when you take a sip. So the enzymes start to break down the different compounds in there, the lipids, the carbohydrates, the alcohols, everything starts to get broken down by the different enzymes in your mouth. So they're changing. And when they change, they get broken down in smaller things, more volatile things. So it's creating new aromas that weren't there previously. The microbiota do the same thing. So they start to break down the chemicals in that drink also. Plus, the microbiota produce their own enzymes as a byproduct. So a great deal of the enzymes in our mouths are created by the microbiota. The germs.
It sounds a bit like there's another fermentation going on in the mouth, which is producing all these additional chemicals, and it's unique to you.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. The pH of your mouth impacts how well the enzymes will function, because each type of enzyme has a window of optimization. Then we could talk about lipid oxidation as well, because lipids oxidize in your mouth and they can create other things such as metallic aromas that you wouldn't smell on the nose, but when you take a sip, lipid oxidation creates metallic aromas that you then smell. So
like the rancid butter kind of thing.
Rancid butter,
yeah.
Exactly. So there's all this stuff being created. So when we talk about finish, it's not just the lingering sensations, it's your mouth transforming the chemical composition of that into something entirely different. And when you swallow, of course, you have the same process going down all the way down your throat. So you're enhancing the opportunity of the enzymes, the microbiota, to interact with those molecules and create new aromas.
And then there's this
tastes.
kind of distillation of it back up and out of your nose. Yeah. So, I mean, it's such a personal, I mean, if we haven't emphasized this enough already during this conversation, flavor's pretty personal, but it's so interesting that we've talked about how personal it is on a sort of neurological level and with all of your emotions and experiences and then the sensory inputs. But it's personal on a chemical level there as well, with the microbiota and the pH and the enzymes. You are taking this thing into your body and then putting your own fingerprint on those chemicals before going through that interpretation process.
It's like your mouth is a flavor factory, and it's changing it. So thereby, you can understand why flavor is created inside our heads, because that chemistry in your mouth was not in the glass. That was different.
Yes. I mean, it's created inside your head on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Then. Yeah.
Yeah. This is it. But it didn't exist in the glass. It's a whole new thing.
It's all in your head.
It's fantastic.
It's all in your head. Right. Final whiskey.
Yeah. Single cask.
Yeah.
I do wish they'd remove that plastic thing off the front. It irritates me.
I mean, part of the reason I picked this bottle is because it's square.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does that sort of say? It's quite masculine, isn't it, with the broad shoulders?
It is masculine,
and everything.
yeah, very square shoulders, and also the way thank you very much, the way they've put the label on the corner
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. But yeah, it has that sort of it's almost like a sort of a masculine perfume bottle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's Glen's
Yeah.
Bay, 58.5%, finished in a Lefroy PX hogshead. There you go.
Wow. Thank you very much.
It's quite heavy.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's psychology in that as
Yeah.
well, right? With weight and value. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess that
absolutely.
study they did with yogurts and different weighted spoons and how
Yeah.
people attributed value depending on
Yeah,
the weight.
all of this.
I mean, weighted cutlery and everything.
Weighted stoppers.
Weighted stoppers.
You buy an expensive bottle, it's normally got a bit of metal in there somewhere.
Bit of lead.
A bit of lead. Exactly, that sort of thing. Yeah, we associate, again, heaviness with quality. We associate lightness with not quality.
Yeah, although, I mean, I had this conversation with Charles and I pointed out to him, well, that's true up to a point, but bone china teacups, because they are delicate, we associate quality because it's fine, right? It's fragile. And the same goes for a lot of wine glasses, right? Thinner crystal, they're lighter in weight, but we associate quality because they're so fragile, so delicate.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's value in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, weight doesn't always communicate. A chunky wine glass says to me, this is a shit wine glass that's designed not to be broken rather than to enjoy wine out of.
Exactly. It has to reflect the flavour of the product itself.
Yes.
So yeah, for example, it works well with whiskey because it's robust flavours.
Yeah.
But like you say, with bone china or a wine glass, if you're trying to match something very heavy with tea, very delicate green tea, it doesn't work because the brain doesn't associate the two together.
It's tasty.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I like it.
But here's the thing: when I taste whiskey, I like to sip first, just bypass the outer nose. Sip first.
Wow, what a bombshell to drop at this point in the conversation.
Yeah.
When I drink whiskey, I just down it.
Well,
no, I'm joking. Okay, so you like to sit first. What, just because you really want to get involved? And actually, it's all going on in there anyway.
Especially whiskies like that. Especially ones that got like a bit of guaiacol in there, a bit of smokiness. Because we were talking about the inner nose, outer nose. The brain processes the information differently, orthonasal, retronasal. And we have a different experience for each. For some reason, nobody knows why, guaiacol and other sort of smoky phenols, we pick them up more on the inner nose than we do on the outer nose.
Oh.
So when we take a sniff, it's shaping our expectations. And those expectations will shape the flavour experience. So if you go straight to the flavour experience, you're not shaping the expectations as much. You're getting perhaps a more unadulterated version of it. Then you can come back to the nose. And in the case of, say, a peated whiskey, that you can't necessarily smell it as smoky, but you can taste it as smoky. If you taste it first, it tunes your brain into the flavour.
Better informed, basically.
Exactly. And then when you come to nose it, you're already in the right frame of mind of what to look for, and it helps you to pick up what's going on.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and it's nice to hear for someone like me who just wants to drink whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You don't think by tasting it, you in any way sort of dull the outer nose, orthonasal smell when you come back to smell it?
No, you wouldn't dull it. I mean, you do get habituation. People think of it as fatigue, but it's a bit different. But I mean, you do get that. But that kicks in within 200ths of a second. So within 200ths of a second, smelling something, whether it's your inner nose or outer nose, you're already starting to turn down the volume on that. So it happens very quickly. So whether you're smelling and then sipping, it's the same difference, or sipping and then smelling, it's the same difference.
Why do you think habituation occurs?
Because it's the way that the non-conscious brain is prioritizing information. So in terms of odors, for example, when you smell something, it's new and novel and interesting. The brain prioritizes that. When it becomes part of your environment, it's deemed as not interesting. The brain is concerned with finding stuff like, oh, the kitchen's on fire, or
let's pay attention to other things
exactly.
that are going
Or
on
is
there.
that the iron I can smell?
I've dealt with that. We can down tune it.
Exactly.
Now let's be aware of other things.
Exactly. So it starts to turn down the volume on it. So when you smell stuff, the brain within 200ths of a second starts to turn down the volume on it, makes it less noticeable. It's related to something called mismatch negativity, MMN. I don't know if you heard of mismatch negativity.
No.
Often it's applied to sound, but it happens with flavour as well. It's whereby you may be in somewhere with a lot of background noise, in a bar or something like that, and your brain just takes that as this is the background noise. I'm going to turn down the volume so we can focus on stuff. But when something unusual happens, like somebody says your name, you pick it up. The interesting thing is it's your non-conscious brain that's been listening all the time, but just turned down the volume on your conscious brain. But as soon as it hears something that's interesting, it says, conscious brain, you need to hear this. And it brings it to your attention. It's the same with aromas as well.
This non-conscious brain is just remarkable entity.
It is, isn't it?
It's one-way dialogue you're having with it.
Yeah.
You only get to listen. You don't get to tell it.
Yeah.
And it's pulling all the strings and deciding what you get to hear and what you get to taste and what's important and what isn't. I mean, I guess it's good it's there because it would be quite a chaotic world if you were having to manage these things manually.
Well, I mean, there was a study that suggested, I don't know how, I think you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but it suggested that the non-conscious brain can process 11 million bits of information per second, whereas the conscious brain can process about 40. That's the difference. That's the difference. So the conscious brain, it's far superior. And essentially, we could look at it in terms of the conscious brain, what we think we experience is really there just for the ride.
Yeah.
It just follows instructions. And this is where it really swings back into marketing and consumer decisions, in that we make decisions non-consciously. Well, our non-conscious brain makes the decisions for us. It tells the conscious brain what to do. And then we spend the rest of the time of the conscious brain trying to convince itself why that's a good decision.
Rationalizing the decision and trying to pick apart why we chose that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever done it? You're wanting to buy something that's maybe a little bit expensive, and you're like, I don't really know why I want it, but I really want it. But then you're convincing yourself why you should have it. We do it all the time.
Yeah, it's so true. What a fascinating sort of dialogue that's going on there.
Oh, amazing. It's like, why do we like chocolate? Why do I like chocolate? I have no idea. It just tastes good. But our non-conscious brain has figured out it likes chocolate and it just says, eat chocolate. But we can't cognitively understand why we like chocolate. It's just good.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's sort of the seat of impulse comes from there, right? Yeah. Or is that more sort of amygdala, lizard brain? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, God. Yeah. I mean, but then also, it that comes into the bacteria, the microbiome in your stomach, because we have, I think, 38 trillion bacteria living on us and in us. They dictate our preference for things. So although we think we like what we like because it's part of our personality, actually it's this other entity, these living bacteria inside of us, that are dictating our preference for specific things.
Yeah, I mean, the whole concept of personality kind of comes into question then. It's like, where does that come from exactly? I mean, it's a combination of your microbiome in concert with this subconscious brain that's feeding you whatever information it deems that you should have, and then, you know, hormones and all sorts of other stuff. And then we can get into conversations about, you know, consciousness itself and where that comes from, which is probably a bit beyond the scope of this whiskey tasting. But I mean, it's funny how all of it sort of plays in. Just one more, just going back to, we were talking a bit about aroma fatigue, or whatever you want to call it, habituation. There's this interesting thing that happens when you have a few whiskeys lined up. Often you'll taste and smell the first one, and you'll make some notes mentally or otherwise about what that smells and tastes like. Then you'll have the second one, And when you go back, you find the first one is a markedly different whiskey in the context of that second one.
Yeah.
Is that the sort of habituation effect taking place? So one thing sort of gets dialed down or up by the other one, and then increases or decreases to the other.
Yeah, part of it for sure. Part of it is the habituation that your brain is adjusting the EQ level of flavour and aroma. That's part of it. Then you also have the recency and primacy effect. What was the last thing you had? What was the first thing? That plays into it as well. Then you also have actually your thresholds have changed. So your thresholds adjust to different things. So for example, I'm not a big spicy food person, but occasionally I'll end up eating something spicy because I didn't realize it's going to be that spicy. And you start off and it's horrendous. But actually you kind of become a bit accustomed to it as you go. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes you're sort of like, oh, actually, I'm getting used to this now. This is quite nice. So your thresholds change in real time, that you can actually deal with things differently. So when you come back to it, essentially, you're a different person. The whiskey is a different product because it's been evaporating all the time. And so everything has changed.
Yeah.
And it comes back to flavour being a video rather than a snapshot, because it's just constantly changing the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. I think the stuff we haven't covered, that's for sure, but this has been a lot and it's been amazing.
Did that answer your question?
It did answer the question, yeah. You've answered a lot of questions and sort of posed a few other ones as well. Magic. I mean, what a brilliant few hours. I really appreciate your time. You need to do a book.
Thank you. It's on the way.
Good.
It's on the way.
Because there's so much here and a lot that I've not heard. I'm pretty well read on a lot of these topics, and I've not heard a lot of this stuff before, or at least not put the way you're putting it. So I think your ability to communicate it, the language you're using, the language that your subconscious brain is deeming you fit to use, is good. So, and it's been fun tasting some whiskies with you as well.
It's been a delight.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Cameron Newton.
Thank you, Tristan.